around what we can do in the animation industries to accelerate transformation and grow and support our industry in a meaningful and collaborative way. So I've invited back our speakers that we've been hearing this week. We've got Nick Klutter from Animation SA and Mind's Eye Collective. And we have Isabelle Rourke, also from Animation SA and Gamation. And we have Kirstin Lee Gray from Different, who's involved in the XR VR spaces. So I'd like to welcome you all. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So,
good to be here.
Good, welcome. So what we've done this week is we've had Animation SA has been engaging through a series of workshops and talks and live events with people who are interested in animation industries. Some of them have businesses, some of them are students, some of them are working professionals. And we've been unpacking the topic of transformation. And we're looking at transformation in quite a broad sense. So not just transformation of demographics, although that's vitally important, transformation of ownership, and transformation of statistics in the student bodies. But we're also looking at how do we transform content? How do we take content that has traditionally been heavily influenced by content from the English-speaking world and Asian content, and make it our own and provide African products for the African continent. And we also want to look at transformation in terms of the whole ecosystem. So there's an entire value chain that is in place that brings you content right from the storyboarders and storytellers through to the distributors and marketers at the end of the value chain. Although we'll argue that that is a more circular process than it seems to be on paper. So joining us for our discussion today, I'd like to welcome Nick from Animation SA. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Candace.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So Nick, you have been involved more in a portfolio we call sector support at Animation SA. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it's really just about intervening in the legislation, policy, regulation space to make sure that all of those conditions are concordant with growth and inclusive growth. So that's really the goal for us, is to see what is and isn't working, what are they proposing to change and in what way, and especially when they propose to make changes without consulting industry, we can intervene. So we prefer to be proactive, but in many cases we have to be reactive because decisions are being made without our consultation, and we try to do what we can because we always consider it a public-private partnership to create a viable, sustainable industry together.
Right, and you're making sure that the artists' voices are represented in the offices where policy is decided.
Yes, artists, technicians, producers across the board.
Great, and you're also involved a little bit in terms of our export missions to other markets. So what markets have South Africans been strongly represented in the last couple of years?
Most consistently at ANSI. So we've been attending that since 2012. We've had a big presence. And incidentally, this year, 2021, Africa is the spotlight. So for those of you who are tuning in, I would definitely recommend that you get the accreditation to form part of the Animation South Africa delegation. It's going to be virtual because we're not, the scheme hasn't reopened for us to coordinate an export mission physically. But we definitely want to have a virtual presence there. So we can attend all the panels, all the workshops, all the share with sessions, and we could participate in the festival side of things too.
Fantastic. That's a great opportunity. So how do people get involved with that? How do they start where do they start, I think is what I want to ask.
They can actually send us an email at share@animationsa.org and say that you're interested in attending ANSI virtually, and we coordinate with the French Institute, IFAS. It's a partnership with them, coordinating through the NFEF to see if we can get as many South African delegates there as possible.
Oh, so you're talking about subsidized accreditation for the festival?
As part of the plan. We have to see the scope. We still have to have that deliberation in terms of to what extent they can be involved and can financially support or just technically support. So we're still trying to establish what that looks like for now.
Right. And what would you say that the perception of South African animation is at these markets? Are you generally finding that people are welcoming and supportive of what we're trying to do?
Especially so. There's a massive appetite for African content. And South Africa is the premier content, both in terms of creation and production. So that's the space we're in.
So positive on the whole, you would say?
The whole, yeah.
Isabelle, have you had similar experiences when you discuss South African animation with internationals? Are they eager to see more?
Yeah, when I used to go to festivals, I haven't been in a while, but South Africa has always been a great highlight to the rest of the world. When I was at the Ottawa Animation Festival, a lot of people had sort of recognized that South Africa is a great destination for animation. Yeah, definitely.
And Kirstin, what about in the VR/AR space? Are you finding a lot of demand for content to see more African product?
Absolutely. I mean, last year I had an opportunity to speak with Yves from ANSI. I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Nick.
The French always correct us saying ANSI, but yeah.
ANSI.
ANSI, yeah.
I had an opportunity to chat with Yves from ANSI, and he was just so excited that there was a South African or an African fictional XR piece. As Nick mentioned, it was supposed to be Africa 2020, and then they changed it to Africa 2021. So aside from just Africa 2021, there's been a good reception for our work, or a big sort of ask for our work globally, from North America, Europe, and Asia.
I also, at the networking event on Friday.
You're on mute as well.
She's an expat, and she said when she got there to the festival and she saw that South Africa had an animation industry, she was so excited that she then researched further and got a job. And I think she works for you, Nick.
Oh, who's that?
Now you've caught me.
Oh, now I got to put you on the spot. Don't worry about it. That's cool. I'm with you. Yeah.
We've had a question in from the audience. Is the market more attracted towards 2D or 3D animation?
Okay, well, I suppose that's directed to me. I would say that it's quite split because some people have a preference for 3D. It depends on the perceptions because it's not always dictated by market drivers, because the market drivers are pretty proportional for both 3D CGI as well as for 2D, both for cutouts. That's actually more conventional for preschool television. And whereas, 3D for your sort of older demographics for 6 to 12. So it changes over time. The formats are changing. Techniques are being hybridized. So it's difficult to say. I mean, I haven't seen any quantitative data indicating a preference for either or, but there are companies who do have certain perceptions with each technique. So it really does depend on what you think about that, because I know, especially in the feature space, the perception is that a 3D CGI is definitely the way to go within the feature space, which is why it's so rare that you happen to see a 2D feature, at least in the West, but in the East, it's very common. And I think that Jenna actually shared a question about share at its chair, 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 as in the chair I'm sitting on.
Thanks for clarifying, Nick. So that's chair@animationsa.org. Jenna will type it into the chat for you. So in the international markets that we've been at, we're obviously marketing South Africa as a service destination and looking for co-production opportunities. Am I right, Nick? Has there been a lot of success with the markets in terms of facilitating co-productions?
There has been, yeah. It's hard to know exactly how many of those have been kindled into an actual co-production, but the point is that I think it creates the impetus that we need to have those co-productions. So in some cases, there are treaty requirements that make it difficult because it's France primarily, and most people are selling shows. So for them, it's series work. But the French-South African treaty doesn't allow for currently television for series to be produced, formally and officially co-produced between countries. So that's what we're actually working with our friends at IFAS to see if we can correct. And I know that signature is pending. So we are hoping that we'll be able to co-produce with France in future.
And there's quite a lot of opportunities as well for people who've developed their own IP, right? So for people to potentially pitch, what sort of people are South Africans able to pitch at these markets?
So you have a lot of network executives that are interested in whatever. They have a target demographic, they got a brand, and it really does pay to do your research. So if you know that France Télévisions is looking for a particular thing, and this is the kind of thing that shoulders well with the other shows that they have on their bouquet, they got these different channels that are dedicated to very specific demographics. So if you do that kind of research, you're going to be stood in much better stead. So, and you got to make sure that your pitch deck actually contains the elements that they need to seriously consider you as a creator. But they are looking for distinctiveness. You don't necessarily have to have so much credits, although that always does help. If you have a proof of concept or established work or something that's been widely publicized, then obviously that's going to stand you in good stead. But for the most part, any unique, distinctive artistic sensibility, they love seeing that kind of stuff. So there's always promising prospects for those who try to have a very unique eye and try to create a show that's quite distinctive, but that's also concordant with their core demographics. So you always have to consider your marketplace. So I would definitely recommend that anyone actually do some research before you pitch anything as a creator.
Thanks. And I'm right. Sorry, Isabelle, you wanted to say something?
One of the things that I'm looking at with partnership with the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce, because they focus on export, and that's one of their key offerings, is looking at the various countries that we have co-productions with and creating delegations that go out. Because what I found in my previous studio was, going to markets is great, the very powerful branding, marketing, meetings platform, but going to the actual countries and meeting people in their studios is a complete game changer. We were able to go to Denmark, and I didn't even know of Danish animation other than their live action because of Lars von Trier, of course, and I got to meet him as well and his business partner. But going to all the different animation studios and meeting with them and getting to see what they do, it's just such a different dynamic because you, in a comfortable space, you're not competing with everybody else like at a festival. You get to really build relationships and go out to dinners. And so from meeting with the different companies, we found the one that had the right match for us. And we were able to build a relationship along with them, and then also tap into some of the country's incentives and support mechanisms. And we ran a really great program. In fact, our animation production training initiative was partly in partnership with the Danes. So yeah, really great stuff can come out of there. It's not always just a co-production, but when you're that close and you get to build those relationships, it really opens the door for other opportunities of what we could do, even possible exchanges of staff going from ours to their countries. So yeah, I really think that it's a unit that could be a lot more robust, and we could be offering a lot more. And I think in the future, this is definitely something that we can look at developing, especially now with having the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce on board as a partner. We can explore these opportunities. And also I heard we're developing a treaty with Kenya, which is really awesome.
Yep.
That's fantastic news. So, so in terms of getting to these markets and getting South Africans ready for these markets, Nick, am I right in saying Animation SA offers a market readiness support?
We do. It's actually part of our export mission. So what we try to do is arrange for these different workshop sessions that happen typically over a weekend. It's a 2-day workshop just to make sure that they have the requisite materials, because we don't impose our subjective bias on their content. What we try to do is say that these are sort of the requisite materials that many executives, because remember, like, it's not just network executives that are looking to, you know, look for a brand new show. They're also looking for, you know, it's different people who work in acquisitions. So if you already have a ready-made show, then that's the right person, the right contact person. If you're looking for a commissioning editor, someone, you know, you're prepared to sell whatever works you've originated, then that would be the right person. But they're all these different titles change depending on where you are in the world. So it's just good to know in principle what all of these people do. So who's who in the zoo is really important. So we try to give them the lay of the land, and these are the different events that take place during the course of the festival. This is the different content that you should include within your pitch decks. This is the minimum thing that they do expect to see. These are the materials that they expect to see when they review your content. And yeah, just basic things like that. We try to cover as much as they can so that they are prepared as possible. And we try to discourage them from participating too much in the festival side of things unless they're in competition, because they're there to conduct business. It is a market. There's a B2B component of many of these different, the ones we've identified to be the key festivals.
Right. So there's a question that's just come in from the audience. Are we more associated with the French markets? Because Isabelle said there's a few countries. So do you care to, Isabelle, do you want to expand a little bit more on what countries we're typically doing business with?
Yeah, Nick will pick up on the ones that I leave out, but I know Germany, Canada, who else?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. I know also with the BRICS countries, we're able to leverage off the BRICS relationships that we have. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
I think Italy and Ireland are the two there, and Australia as well.
Actually, there's some research on a few of those countries that I'm going to share that we did with the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce, which we will share on our website once it goes live. And I think that information is quite pertinent because it was research into what the animation landscapes are in those countries, what opportunities were there. So it could be quite a useful bit of research that people can access.
Thanks. That speaks in part to the second part of the question, which is how are these animation opportunities to be approached other than just pitching at festivals?
Well, just continuing from the first part, our first treaty that we signed in '97 was Canada. So that's why we thought that we would try Ottawa International Animation Festival 1 year. And one of the things we've identified to be one of the largest concert markets in the world is MIPCOM, MIP Junior, MIP TV, and MIPCOM. And they all pitch at different times of the year. I think that MIP TV is an earlier part of the year, and MIP Junior and MIPCOM take place in October, roughly every year. So we try to see what we can dovetail and what works, because I know that the Cape Town International Animation Festival is also taking place. So we're trying to make sure that there's no conflicting calendars there, so we can get people to go to one and then the other and come to ours as well, because we want to make ours a flagship for all of Africa. And yeah, so in terms of apart from just pitching at festivals, it's difficult because you have to make contacts, you have to gain visibility in some way. So like Isabelle was talking about the tours, which usually either as a prelude to the market or it takes place during the market. It depends on what is your reason for going. So if you already have a prospective co-production in place, you go and meet with these people, but it's about establishing a rapport with them first and foremost. So you reach out with them to them via email, or they have a call out that you respond to, or there's a network of people that happen to know these people and you get in touch with them. But markets, we find, is the best place to meet and greet. And that's why we try to have a consistent presence there, because then they know that you are a serious player, that you remain in the space. And then that's how you can actually be afforded these opportunities where they may exist, because the decision makers are there deciding at these markets. And they're looking for people like you. So they're looking for content creators, they're looking for services from each of these respective studios. They're looking for ideas. So that's why it really pays to have a presence.
Yeah, I met my first co-production partner was with Canada, and then we outsourced to India, the production. We were in partnership with Dumi and myself with Fundi Wundler on The Magic Cellar a million years ago. And yeah, that really worked out great because Canada brought the executive producer skills, and we were then able to outsource to India, which was painful at the time, but also was great in that we were able to go to India, study the market, look at how they grew at such a fast rate. So it was a great learning experience for us. And yeah, the production managed to go quite broad and wide and got a lot of awards. So yeah, co-productions is a nice way to add to what you're missing and where you're lacking, and getting the extra funding and the extra resources. So it's a really great way to do a production.
So I'd like to ask Kirstin, for those of you who don't know Kirstin, she has been working in the AR, VR space, developing content and getting and working in what is a relatively small but tight-knit AR, VR community in South Africa, as well as beyond South Africa. There are other pockets of activity on the continent. Kirstin, are there such markets or similar markets in the interactive content space?
Absolutely. Most film festivals have a digital content. I want to say branch of their festival, and a lot of these digital content branches are looking for content at concept stage, which is great for South African and African content creators, because a lot of people would not necessarily have the resources or the means to go into production immediately. So, for instance, with my project, Tokolosh and Other Readiness Creatures, I submitted the concept to VR Days, and as by virtue of participating in VR Days' content market, I was able to really gauge who is willing to sort of work with us. And I think we sort of just for XR specifically, you kind of just revert back to the co-production treaties that, like Isabelle and Nick already mentioned, are in existence. And I found that there was a great sort of want to collaborate from Canada, from France, from the Netherlands, particularly the Netherlands, because they're growing their space currently. They're trying to really develop their immersive content market, and they're creating funds that specifically address the needs of that market, as well as the UK and Taiwan. So people are keen to collaborate. I think that also just in terms of the funding of the project, that could really help XR or rather immersive storytellers in South Africa, because you have the ability to leverage funding from other sort of governmental arts or governmental funding bodies in those countries, where it's a lot more sort of developed, and the funding is a lot more I want to say more robust, and it also gives us access to skills in those countries. which I think as we develop and as we grow will be essential. So it's not just essential for us to collaborate with each other, but it's also essential for us to collaborate with people outside of South Africa. So, and just in terms of Africa, because I think that Africa itself is quite exciting. We have, sorry, there's quite a loud train coming past. I hope it's not too loud on your end. This is the joys of living close to the train station. Yeah. In Nigeria and Kenya, they are developing their immersive spaces quite rapidly as well. And I think that now that Isabelle's mentioned there's a treaty coming with Kenya, I think that can be quite exciting as well. Just in terms of collaborations and tapping into other markets and other co-productions with other countries within the XR space.
Thanks, that's interesting. I think in terms of the conversations we've been having over the last week, there was definitely a call for collaboration with other industries and also within our industry as well. And a lot of people, I think, from the feedback I got, feel like they don't see enough local content. And not a lot of local content actually makes it into the public space, whether it's in an exhibition space or whether it's in on an online space. So there's definitely a need for collaborating and bringing together projects that are in development and working with ideas and kind of, maybe it's a 30-second teaser for a show you want to bring out and showing your style. Is there something like that in the VR community where you share your ideas?
We're kind of all just, because the community is so small, we kind of share directly with each other. But I think as we sort of map the space out a lot more, I think we'll start seeing online sort of resources sort of become or develop a little bit more. But currently we're so small and dynamic that we can literally just sort of share with each other directly. So yeah, I'm not quite sure that answers your question at all.
It does. It sounds like the early days of Animation SA,
yeah,
when we had our animation exchange events, and there's definitely a need for those kind of events. I think going forward, our exchange events haven't happened in the last year because obviously putting people together in a crowded theatre hasn't been an option. But we have been looking at ways to revive it and bring it back. And I think a lot of people feel that they are working in isolation without help, especially if they have a little project that they're trying to figure out how to get off the ground. Isabelle, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your project to support SMMEs and IP development, because I think it's very important, not only that they get the infrastructural support that they need, but also in terms of sharing ideas and coming together in a community. Have you found a need for that?
Definitely, there's definitely a need for that, because what we found with just the SMMEs in Johannesburg, they also isolated. And when I created the internship at Chimologong Digital Innovation Precinct, it allowed at least a space where they could come in. And we had the Fagugezi Festival, so it also became a really great place to draw everybody into one kind of nice big precinct. And from engaging with them in that space, you know, I really got to see the need for them being clustered together. And Chimologong wasn't ideal because it doesn't allow for scaling. It's very much just individual little per people, and you have to take your machine away. Whereas with animation, our needs are a little bit different. So yeah, hence looking at the incubator space and how we can develop that further. And been researching it for quite a while now and putting all the different, because incubation is such a massive, expensive process. It really took a lot of puzzle, I call it a big, putting together a big puzzle and bringing all the pieces together. So all the different partners and all the different elements that they can cover. Some can cover the offices and the machines and so forth, and some can offer different pieces of it. So we've got a few of those pieces together now to at least get started with it. And from this sort of pilot phase this year, I think we're able to then just analyze it in more detail and pretty much do what I did with my animation production training initiative, which was every year do a post-mortem on it and improve it, refine it until it's so excellent and efficient that you're getting maximum output from it. And for us, maximum output is that the IP is developed, that it's able to get broadcast, that it's able to explore as much of extracting value from the value chain. So especially licensing and merchandising, and really looking at, and I think this is one of the festivals we need to start looking at, is going to licensing and merchandise festivals. I mean, even if it's initially just for research, just to learn and see what other people are doing with merchandise, because merchandise can be so broad. And when you see just some of the innovative things that people are creating, I think that'll open a lot of entrepreneurs' minds around what we could be offering. So yeah, definitely in future working with JCCI to look at adding to our festival runs and include licensing and merchandising. But yeah, definitely the incubator space is a great space for peer learning, cross-pollinations, sharing resources, reducing costs. There's a really strong case to be made for incubators, especially for the arts.
Fantastic. I'm very excited to see what kind of amazing collaborations come out of that incubator space. And like you said, it's a pilot project, right? So I understand you've been talking to the Durban Film Commission a little bit around potentially starting something similar in Durban and working with other film commissions. Do you want to share anything around that?
Not yet. It hasn't developed.
Okay. All right. But it is the point is once there's a proof of concept with the SMME incubation hub up in Johannesburg, we will have a formula to roll it out in the rest of the country, and then it's just a matter of aligning the right partners and making sure that that people have access. So so yeah,
and KZN is quite nicely positioned, because the KZN Film Commission has got a nice space in which that it can be done. So yeah, it's definitely getting the model clear and then being able to replicate.
Which will then provide opportunities for animators around the country to not only take their content to market, but also develop the SMMEs and their businesses to gear up for production to get their products to market.
Yeah, there's also a tender, I think, that's going out by CEDA to fund incubators, but it's to fund them in less developed provinces. So, I mean, for me, I find that really difficult with, provinces that don't have any animation. It really becomes a much more difficult case. It becomes a much more expensive case to motivate or set something up like that. So I'm not really going to look at that. And it's really unfortunate that government wants to develop the other provinces, but they really not been cognizant of the fact that this doesn't exist in the provinces where we have developed. So there's a bit of, non-communication or them not engaging with us when designing these things, which is so unfortunate, because I really feel that if anybody sets up an incubator for animation with the way they've designed the RFQ, that it's going to be very costly and very difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think we need to engage with CEDA if this is an area that they want to be playing in. that Animation SA should get involved in just advising them on designing that a little bit more appropriate for the people who want to set up incubators.
Thanks. There's some loud airplane. I hope you can't hear it. So in the SMME development space, one thing that came back from my engagements with them in the workshop was that it's difficult to find places online to collaborate. And now that the animation exchange events aren't happening, there definitely is a call to create an online infrastructure and channels and means for distribution. So if we're looking at the animation ecosystem and transforming the whole ecosystem, it's got to go from origination right through to distribution. I've heard there are some exciting developments in this field, like people creating specifically African platforms for African content. Has anyone heard of any exciting projects that they'd like to mention in the platform development space? No?
That I've no.
Apart from our website, we're going to relaunch very soon to give visibility to animation and VFX professionals. So everyone would register and that they'd be present, they'd be able to share their portfolio. It's pretty much a professional networking platform specifically for animation and VFX professionals. Apart from that, and all the other bits and pieces, repository for knowledge and information sharing, and perhaps some tutorials and different things to help for upskilling purposes, and yeah, and then job posts and things of that nature. That's the kind of content that we're going to try, the value that we want to generate for our stakeholders and our members.
Thanks, Nick. That's exciting. So we're looking at a space where we're developing this online resource for everyone, but this is for everyone in animation, right? So we're going to launch, if I'm not mistaken, the basic services this year, and then we're going to be looking for input on what kind of services do you need, what kind of online forums do you need, what kind of platform do you need? So we're looking for feedback, because Animation SA exists for the sole purpose of serving the animation industry, right? So if you're an animator, you are the animation industry. If you're a student who's studying it, this is your industry. And in order to build it, we're going to need your feedback. So over the course of the next year, we will be reaching out to a lot of you to try and find out what it is that you need, so that we can build a bigger and better place online, a home for animators. Kirstin, did you want to comment?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to add that for immersive storytellers, or anybody actually in the immersive space, even though our platforms don't necessarily, we don't have an Animation SA type platform for the immersive industry just yet. And I'm sure that Animation SA will add that branch soon. However, there are labs that exist on the continent, which practitioners can apply to. So for instance, Digital Lab Africa, which by the way has a deadline for the 4th of April, they are they're great for anybody who's interested in entering the space, or anybody who has an idea or has a project that they've started, and they pair you with mentors that work in the industry. So that's a great way for you to build your resources and build your knowledge base, build your network. I know that Electric South has a lab that runs annually as well. At the moment, it's an in-person lab, however. So at the moment, it's on hold until the pandemic becomes, or at least we know what's sort of happening with the pandemic, or at least until they know what's happening with the pandemic. So look out for Digital Lab Africa as well as the New Dimensions Lab. That's a way in which you could sort of access a similar type of information and support that you might need for your idea, for your project within the immersive space.
Thanks for that information. It reminds me of something else that came out of our workshops, and that was identifying a need for different segments of the industry to work together. So say if Nick goes to a content market and comes back with a signed co-production agreement, but his company has the expertise to roll out a 2D animated series, but not potentially focused, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, but perhaps not potentially focused on game development and ancillary products. And something that business owners in the animation space mentioned was that there is definitely room for collaboration, like cross-disciplinary collaboration. So for gaming companies to partner with animation companies to bring out ancillary products and to capitalize on IP that has been, let's say it's been broadcast in South Africa for a certain amount of time and has a ready-made market for games and ancillary products, or potentially for education products. There's lots of ways that we can bring in different applications. Kirstin, in the education and training aspects of AR and VR, are there a lot of people doing that and in South Africa and producing that kind of content, do you think?
In the education space, I think that that's where we really need to ramp up. I think aside from just sort of making people aware of that the industry exists, and aside from just educating them on how these different immersive or XR disciplines work, that's where we really need to sort of increase. We need to increase the yes, definitely capacity. I think that we have currently. I know that Chimologong has a maker space. I know that AFTA has lessons for immersive storytelling. I'm not quite sure about SAE. I think I did hear something about SAE including this into their syllabus. I could be wrong, but that's where we could really sort of ramp up, is on the educational side of things.
I imagine there's a huge demand for that, especially post-pandemic, when people have realized that at any point you could suddenly have a school closure and need to provide content for your children who lock down at home with you and only have, you know, the screen to entertain them and educate them.
Absolutely. And I think the younger generations, I mean, what we've noticed with sort of taking the content into different communities, the older generation, it's almost like an aha moment because they've never experienced this, but the younger generation, they are aware of these technologies and they're needing sort of a blueprint as to how to enter the market. So I think that that's definitely, that's a space that needs to be defined a lot more. It's just sort of making those paths clearer for younger individuals who want to participate. I think that it's sort of like, at the moment, sort of like the Wild West, where you sort of, you go on a journey and you somehow find yourself in the space. Not everybody, but that was my journey specifically. So I think that that sort of mapping out the space, making paths clear would definitely help us to not just sort of build capacity, but really sort of sift through, or rather let the talent sort of rise, because we've got people who could potentially sort of come up with really great ideas. So I think we'll really, we don't know that these people exist because we're just not tapping into those, we're not tapping into education, we're not tapping into sort of building our capacity in that way.
I had a great opportunity, I think it was 2 years ago, to visit Naledi 3D in partnership with Eon had created a really amazing internship program for VR students. And it was just mind-blowing. I mean, they had an entire aquarium in VR. I mean, that's just going to change the game for those poor animals locked in those aquariums. I know they do a lot of research and whatever in those aquariums, but it just, you know, $1 million, I think, just to have the dolphins kind of thing. So they're very expensive places, which VR can, you know, really, and also allow it more accessible to countries that can't afford to have aquariums. Plumbing in VR, like just all the different disciplines, learning mechanical stuff in VR. It was really great what Eon was doing, and also just sharing that knowledge through the internship process. I even saw on the phone, you can add on a VR sort of enhancing device to an app that allows you to look at your frog, for instance, in 3D and just mantle it and look at the different organs so you don't have to kill frogs anymore. So I think VR is really just a game changer in terms of the education space. And I'm hoping that more is going to come out of that going forward.
And if we're looking at like the traditional edutainment space, even, you know, creating content, online content for teachers, and yeah, gaming and gamifying content, making that available online and prolific. I think it might be a game changer for the whole education landscape. And let's face it, a revolution in education would do a lot for transformation in our country.
Even with for instance, subjects like science and maths, where we may some schools in rural areas may not have access to labs or access to resources that you would in the city. I think that it's a great equalizer and a great sort of it's a great way to democratize the educational space.
Isabelle, did you want to comment on that?
No.
Sorry, Canada, just one more point to the Eon to the Eon program that Isabelle mentioned. I think that at the moment we see these programs pop up, but we're sort of at the mercy of CSI funding and sort of once-off corporate funding rounds. And I think that that's where the educational department need to sort of, once they see the value in this, it needs to be something that's done on a continuous basis. I think that at the moment we see these brilliant programs like the EON program sort of pop up, but it's really just a one-time thing. And I think that sort of increasing the volume would help a lot.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. There's so much scope and so much scope for growth in the education applications. As we've said, there's multiple broadcasters who are looking for content around the world. There are new platforms emerging, looking for content. We've had a lot of evidence of this locally. Netflix has come in and commissioned some local content. I think other video on demand services will do the same. In terms of providing the workforce for all of this and looking at education, I see there's a question that came through speaking to whether companies in South Africa are more keen to employ generalists or specialists. Nick, do you want to answer that?
I kind of did already, but I kind of said that the risk-averse studios with unpredictable income streams tend to prefer independent contractors or fixed-term employees. So everything is subject to negotiation. So it also depends on the term, because our labor laws require that after 3 months, you're considered a permanent employee. So it's all project dependent. So it's on scope, it's on timelines, it's on deliverables, all those factors matter.
Thanks. Yeah, I've found as well that there's space for everyone. There's definitely a need for people with specialist skills, and there's definitely a need for generalists as well, especially if you're in a fast-moving, more agile environment like the small SMMEs on the periphery. They're looking, I think, more for generalists who can jump in whenever they're needed. And then you're also looking at the bigger companies where it makes sense to have people who focus and specialize on one particular task in production. I've always found that there's room for everyone. And at this point in the game, we need all skills. Isabelle, would you agree on that? Are there some skills you feel that are more needed than others?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our scarce and critical skill shortage that was highlighted through our market research attests that there's definitely certain areas that haven't developed enough. And this is where, you know, having professional courses comes in handy to kind of have professionals who can take on those different areas and specialize in different disciplines. So yeah, specialization is definitely where you want to grow the industry, especially since we come from very much a generalist industry. But in terms of growth, to open up the market for international outsourcing and getting more of that kind of work, having bigger numbers of specialists at a high level of standard is definitely going to hold us in good stead. So we definitely need to look at putting programs in place that are going to support that outcome.
Thanks. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. We're almost out of time for today. Wow, that went quickly. Nick, is there anything you want to say in closing?
What to say in closing? There's quite a bit of things that have been touched upon, but I'll just try and see if I can unify some of the threads. Isabelle mentioned earlier about the requirements, you know, that we should absolutely consider licensing and merchandising, that we absolutely need to do. I always love this. This is my favorite example, but there's a US toy company named Hasbro, and they entered into agreements to purchase Entertainment One, which, for those of you who don't know, is the company that actually owns Peppa Pig, the thing that's probably plagued your life if you have toddlers or preschoolers around your house. And but they paid 3.3 billion pounds for that. And it's mostly due to that one piece of intellectual property. So, and that's primarily because of the merchandising side of things. So if we have one property like that, that's an equivalent like that among the whole African diaspora, there's massive prospects for the future. Just on Kirstin's question earlier about whether or not that there's some collaboration and cross collaboration between studios, there absolutely is, because not every studio offers all of those skills that we would need in-house. There are some that do offer AR, VR, and interactive media, but for the most part, most of us specialize in very specific niches. Some are in gambling, some are the entertainment space, some are edutainment, some are in commercials. So we all specialize in different things for different reasons. So I mean, we even receive briefs that you know, is beyond the scope of what we offer in-house, and in which case we look to either collaborate or we try to recruit independent contractors to fulfill that function. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing people should absolutely be open to. And yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in and for your interest. And yeah, please join the community, be a part of it. And if anyone has any insights or queries that they can direct, you can do it through our website, hopefully when that does get launched in future. So yeah, that's everything from me.
Thanks so much, Nick. Kirstin, would you like to say something in closing?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody at Animation SA for including us in this conversation. I think this is wonderful to participate in. I'm really sort of grateful for the opportunity to sort of be a mouthpiece for this growing industry. That's a very scary thing. And I think that the great thing about this industry, even though we're sort of still mapping it out and still figuring out our way, is that it hasn't hit the mass market anyway globally. And we really have an opportunity to add our voices, insert our voices from the jump, from the get-go. And we have an opportunity to not just participate in an industry that's already been created to benefit others, but we can have this industry benefit us. And that's across different industries. It's across creative industries, mining, medical, agriculture, you name it. I think that this technology is a great application for anybody interested in developing the space that they're in, as well as obviously the creative industries. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate, and I hope that I could shed some light on what's been happening in this space.
You are so welcome. We are you and you are us. We are all the same group. We are the animation industries. We don't want to just say we are specifically supporting 2D animated series for television, and that's our mandate. It's the same skill set, right? To produce, you're still 3D modeling, you're still texturing, you're still animating or programming, you're still designing. So it's the same skill set. And with limited resources, we need to come together. And, you know, the policy work that Nick and Isabelle are doing, the submissions they're making to the various government departments for representation. We want to ensure that everyone is represented. So if you feel strongly about any of these things, get in touch with anyone at Animation SA or chair at animationsa.org. Isabelle, is there something you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I'd like to do a little call out to the VR community, because one of our partners in our incubator, Maxim Digital, it incorporates animation, gaming, and VR. And they actually have no real defined plan for the VR unit. So yeah, I'm doing a call to all VR specialists who want to come in and partner, to experiment, to do something interesting, something different. Yeah, we're open to exploring some ideas with people and looking at it as a space for experimentation.
Great, thanks. That sounds very exciting. I definitely have got the sense over the course of this last week that there's so much room to grow. There really is. And we know that there's talent. We know that there's a demand. We know that we have the skills training programs in place, although sometimes access is a problem, and sometimes they need to be scaled up, and sometimes they need to be tailored a little bit more. There's always work to be done to make it better, but we will always be better as a result of collaborative effort. And there are people out there who are innovating, especially in post-COVID times, like innovating in how to work in distributed teams, innovating in terms of how to make the most of software that's free, how to plug it together, how to work with new technology, and how to connect with each other. So these are all conversations that we regularly have around the Animation SA virtual table. And it's been really wonderful and enlightening to connect with all of you this last week. To those of you who participated, thank you very, very much for your time. I'd also like to thank our wonderful panelists today for their very enlightening talks during the course of last week, and again for joining us today to share their expertise. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our wonderful, generous sponsors, the Goethe-Institut's platform, bringing artists together and facilitating conversations to develop the creative and cultural industries in Southern Africa. So thank you very much for joining us. I think that's it from us. And if you have any questions or anything else you'd like to ask, keep engaging with us on our social media platforms. And we'll be regularly posting news and opportunities. And then when the new website's launched, rush in, sign up to Animation Essay and sign up for our newsletter and get involved. And I think that's it from me. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kanda. Thanks to you.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.